Come on, Zinogre. Just charge up. All I need for you to do is charge up. Zinogre, charge up. Anytime now. I want to have fun. Come on, I need clips. Come on, Zinogre, charge up. Thank you. Hey there, hunters. Welcome back to the Gunners Guild. You see, when Sarah and I were talking about this series, I mentioned wanting to cover Zinogre. I mean, of course, right? He's an iconic, hugely popular monster that's appeared in basically every Monster Hunter game since its introduction, and only took a slight break in world before coming back to Iceborne. He's a fan favorite, and for good reason. Stylish, has a killer background track. I mean, he's just a great fight, and everything about him is good.
That's where the issue was, though. Even though Zinogre's been around for a while, he hasn't really changed all that much. You go in, you know what to expect, and you get what you come in for. But we don't think this is enough for Zinogre. He deserves more. It's ironic, whilst we did cover a similar point on the Rathian and Nagakuga video, we praised them for being the same and being fine because of it. But it doesn't feel appropriate for Zinogre to stagnate. He's a late game threat on the same level as Tigrex or Celta's Queen, for Christ's sake. He needs more love, to feel threatening, and to get a facelift with his moveset. After all, as a flagship, he's deserving of such.
So that's what this is kind of about. Zinogre, the underdog. You're right, good joke, Sarah, good job. Let's discuss this great monster, though, and ultimately the shortcomings he has as the games have progressed. So let's start with his introduction in Portable Third. Zinogre was brand new to the franchise and a new type of wyvern, specifically the Fanged Wyvern classification, and he would have this all to himself for 2 whole generations. With regards to the fight, his AI was actually quite advanced for his time. Zinogre had heavy combos, instant turnaround moves in a game full of 90-degree head turns from other monsters, and unique fighting mechanics in his charge state and being able to mine the bugs off his back. He was a monster that really subverted our expectations, not doing any of the traditional predictable movements that we were so used to seeing. He could jump past you, backflip and tail slam, throw projectiles at a curve from afar. Everything seemed great for this monster. Seriously, it's no wonder why everyone loves this monster. He had everything going for it. That would kind of change, though, as we move into Monster Hunter 3U.
In 3 Ultimate, Zinogre was very much the same fight. It makes sense, the same generation, you can't expect too many changes for it. However, what we did get was Stygian, the edgy emo brother of Zinogre. See, this is where we feel like the base species started to get left out in the rain. See, Zinogre's moveset didn't really change too much in G-Rank, he only really got faster and maybe one combo here or there. Stygian got all the love. Whilst it's obviously a similar fight to Zinogre, he had entirely new moves with his Dracophage bugs. These were completely instrumental to Stygian's difficulty. You see, instead of instantly flying out as a projectile, they were a delayed homing strike, meaning you'd eventually have to deal with multiple hits from all different angles, making it a bit of a hectic fight. He also borrowed Zinogre's ability to instantly perform a pirouette whilst getting up from a topple or a backslam, and the ability to charge up whilst walking around. This was especially threatening as before, it was encouraged to flash the standard species as it charged up while staying still. This option was no longer available with Stygian, and as such, led you to deal with his charged state more often than not.
The dragon element itself was especially painful in 3U, and coupled with the delivery method Stygian employed, it was a hateful combo. See, slime was a very powerful aspect one could have on their weapons in 3U, dealing huge fixed damage and part break damage. A weapon that can make the most of these explosions would be massively beneficial and more effective than straight up raw weapons. And Stygian did not want any part of this. The way the Dracophage timings lined up would inevitably lead you to having to deal with like 5 different attacks all coming from different directions. Unless you sheathed, strafed the hell out of here and there and had entire bars worth of block stamina, you were in trouble.
Not only that, on top of the literal bullet hell that Stygian gave you, there was another aspect of 3U that was a nightmare. G-rank speed modifiers. Ask anyone who played a decent chunk of G-rank in 3U who knows, those monsters just didn't feed on Popo. Nah, these bitches got into the secret stash of Wyverian anabolics. Shit was fast. Black Diablos, Stygian Zinogre, and yes, even something like Great Baggy became horror stories with their speed being very capable of juggling you all over the shop. For testing, I actually fired up 3U on my DS to check for comparison. With Lance, a G Zinogre took just shy of 11 minutes or so. Stygian, you double that. It was an offensive powerhouse that really pushed you to your limits.
So moving on to 4U Zinogre, this is actually the one game where I feel like Zinogre was treated properly, especially with his G-rank moveset. See, his moveset was revamped with more paw slams, now doing a 3-burst combo when charged, and more AoE with the thunder explosions around him and such. His Fulgur bugs would also be thrown off him with more attacks, adding an insane amount of range to his moveset. Zinogre became a great all-around threat. While Stygian was also in 4U, Zinogre doesn't feel as left in the dust as in other games, maybe because both of these species have Frenzy and there tends to be a bit of an overlap moveset between the two. I mean, that is until you get to the awful Apex Zinogre. The thing was a nightmare. It had that one giant homing bug that was the worst, dealing essentially all your life and damage and always sneaking up onto you. Not to mention, they thought it was a great idea to have Apex Zinogre's weak spots be a choice between the claws, a hit zone of 15, and the tail, a hit zone of 16. And then the back, which is the actual exploitable spot without white stones, which is, all the way up there. Good luck with that one. Though that was pretty much the only thing Apex State had. Stygian did not get an Apex form, but he did have his own special treatment with the new and fresh moveset, even whilst retaining some of the terrible Rabina bubbles that screwed with you back in 3rd gen. Even so, Zinogre had a lot to keep himself feeling fresh and 4U, which is probably his greatest time in the game. This was kind of the point we wanted to make to this video. Zinogre was done justice here, and he could easily be side by side with his brother Stygian without feeling left out. But from here on, it feels like it was just downhill for poor Zinogre, a monster who really deserves more.
Moving on to Generations and GU. Zinogre's moveset was kind of gutted, and he became very stale and kind of boring. Most of his flashy attacks and combos were removed, like the back slam into the kickflip and the 3-hit slam combo. They were instead added to Thunderlord's moveset. Like in 3U with Stygian, GU Zinogre was kind of left behind in order to prop up his other brother, Thunderlord. Because to be honest, Thunderlord at its base was a bigger, slower Zinogre. He starts in a charged state and can go Super Saiyan 2, however the majority of his attacks were from the 4U Zinogre. You did have some cool changes of course, like he scattered his bugs to drop a charge level via a huge AoE, his slams would project forward thunder strikes, and he had a cool ass backflip combo that always seemed to hit me with some obscene tracking. The thing is that the moveset was still very much, oh, I'm Zinogre but cooler, when you compare it with the base species. It's good looking, and it's a badass deviant, and I'm not saying that Thunderlord is a bad monster, he's actually quite fun, especially in G rank. Again, it feels like they cannibalized Zinogre's identity so they could make Thunderlord feel so much better in comparison.
Thunderlord and Stygian Zinogres always seem to steal the spotlight from Zinogre, which is a shame because we all love this monster and we want to see him be amazing. It's just sad that this monster, which is a clear fan favorite, just keeps getting pushed off to the side in favor of his brothers. And unfortunately, this trend is going to continue on in 5th gen.
Something to note that since his introduction as well is that Zinogre has always had a weak zone on the back leg. Now this paired really well with the fight design, as he was always going over you, to the side, backflipping or twirling about like a maniac, so you'd eventually end up with a face full of dog ass. Not only that, it was a trip zone. Do enough damage, you get a topple, meaning you had further access to the juicier head and back zones. It was a nice combination of the fight mechanics versus the hit zones, and always presenting them to the player. Yeah, then we move on to World. None of that for you. World didn't get Zinogre until the Iceborne expansion. There we got both Zinogre, then a few months after launch we got Stygian. These guys got completely reworked, and for some reason they got big, like real big. The movesets did also get a looking at as well. One of the more notorious additions was to Zinogre, which gave him a headbutt into a backwards jump, which would always knock you flying. It was very fast and annoying for Blade Masters, and then you coupled it with the fact he would combo that into a lot more charging moves, coupled with the fact that that ended up with Zinogre charging up way faster than we were used to. This seemed to be a lot more difficult fight. Another interesting note is that with this size increase, the speed of the monster actually fell. Some of the forward slams had a delay added to them, and combos were just a bit less lively. Then again, this could be attributed to 5th gen itself slowing down monsters, a phenomenon we've covered fairly extensively in this series.
Stygian, conversely, had a very dramatic introduction and got the super move that 5th gen kept adding to all their monsters with his Psycho Crusher combo he performed in his charge state. In general, people tend to prefer this fight over regular Zinogre for a few reasons. Firstly, the hit zone. Regular Zinogre had usable forearms when charged only, and it was very easy to knock it out of the charge, so you're kind of juggling between an exploitable zone that locked you out after a certain amount of damage. See, you kind of needed the forearm, at least for Blade Masters, as the Zinogre family has always had heads that require the aim of a pigeon above a car to hit, so naturally we went for the next best option, use the arms to topple, and then do what we can from the head while it's down. Stygian then came along with the better forearm hit zone when uncharged, so you tended to have more uptime on your good hit zones. Not only that, but Stygian's headbutt also didn't automatically knock you down on your butt, it was a weaker knockback for some unknown reason, so weapons could actually hyper armor through it. This was a massive buff to weapons with slower combos and even allowed some lighter weapons to persist through it. I mean, the fight overall was just much better received than regular Zinogre, and that brings us back to this theme here of Zinogre, who is a great monster and everybody loves it, but he just keeps getting overshadowed by Stygian and Thunderlord. It leads me to think, like, do we actually like the Zinogre fight? Or is he just a cool design, and that also means that we get to fight better monsters like Stygian and Thunderlord down the line? I mean, who's to say? Now let's move on to our current iteration with Rise.
Rise has both Zinogre and the return of Thunderlord. Well, Diet Thunderlord, Nushi, Apex, Alpha, whatever you want to call it, Thunderlord. To be honest, we kind of expected Stygian in Sunbreak at some point. He fits in so perfectly with the theme and could function as our Cerberus for the more Western mythology design. Rise kind of gutted Zinogre in a lot of ways. Zinogre now takes forever to charge up in Rise, and it's so easy to damage him out of the animations or kill him before he gets fully charged. Of course, we do have to consider that he's high rank only right now, and we've been looking at mostly G monsters throughout the video, but still, he gets this new Paw Slam into an instant charge, and you'd expect him to get his battery up and running a bit faster with that addition, right? There's also a severe lack of the iconic back slam, which is a shame, and in general he's only really got a few moves in this moveset. A simple slam or a 1-2 when charged, a backflip, a lunge, and a couple of charge claws which really can't hit anything. There's a few thunder attacks that he gets now which can be hit from range, which reminds us a bit of Kirin in a way, but he's also extremely small now, a sort of flip-flop from what World was like. His head's always available, so you can really just about punish anything.
Thunderlord, on the other hand, oh boy, man, that is a real fight. Everything about Zinogre and Rise is just cranked up to 12 with Thunderlord. He's got bigger AoEs, the expanded combos, the backslams and the kickflips, the huge stylish finisher moves, just everything. Not to mention an amazing hit zone on the front legs, meaning that during his hardest phases, you kind of always got something to hit. Even for gunners, you can shoot the front paws, and that's saying something. Thunderlord's gimmick of staying charged and then going Super Saiyan 2 is still there, and it really keeps this fight going. While I'm not the biggest fan of Apex topples that were introduced in Rise, I feel like Thunderlord in Rise is damn near the perfect fight. I mean, if you think about it, we're used to getting the topple of Zinogre when it's in its powerful state when you dispel the charge, and in Apex topple, I mean, if it was going to work anywhere, it seems the right fit for this monster to knock it out of Apex state, which brings his charge back down. I mean, it's amazing. Seriously, who doesn't love how hyper aggressive and powerful this guy is? I can't gush enough about this guy. Again though, this does bring us back to the entire point of this video. Why does Zinogre keep getting overshadowed by his brothers? He always feels like practice or tutorial fight for the other two. It's a great monster, but I feel like Capcom is just doing him a disservice by constantly gutting his moveset and then giving it to his brothers. And it just makes it look like an inferior fight, which doesn't need to be the case. Like Tigrex and Brute Tigrex are good examples of pretty different fights, and both are very powerful and equally scary in their own right. It was really weird trying to script this video in discussion with Sarah because, like, it's not like we don't like Zinogre. He's always been a staple since his introduction. We just can't really explain why. Everything aesthetically is great, and the design's great, the roar and soundtracks are amazing, and the armor sets always look sick. But, like, everything mechanically is not there. The fight feels slow and lackluster, except in For You, still the best Zinogre. And his armor sets are usually pretty bad skill-wise, so there's not much of a reason to keep hunting him. It just kind of reminds you of Namiel. Great design, just everything else is flawed. We just really want to see him beefed up, I guess. Some monsters got treated extremely well, even in Rise, such as Rathalos. We did a video on that. Great thing to see him change so much. I'm not really sure why Zinogre has to feel so boring though, especially when his big brother, Thunderlord, is such an amazing fight. And like in World, we had Odo Garen and Ebony Odo, which are very similar fights, but obviously Ebony Odo was the crazier of the two, but both fights felt extremely good. Like G-rank Odo Garen starting Enraged was amazing. And while I guess you can make the same argument for World, Zinogre, and Stygian, it just seems to be a repeating theme here that Zinogre is good, but there's always a better Zinogre, and that's the part that we don't like. Like, Zinogre is cool and all, but that just doesn't seem to be enough anymore. Anyway, that's just kind of what we wanted to discuss. It's a weird topic, I know, but it was really hard to bring up Zinogre because, like, I don't know, it's weird, right? You try it. Try to think of something to say about Zinogre that hasn't already been said. It's kind of hard. He's iconic, beloved by many, but there's always a bigger fish, or dog in this case. I just want to be challenged by this dog again. I want it to have his own identity. Hell, maybe even give him a break for a game. Give him some space to breathe. I don't know.
Who knows? Monster Hunter fans, and us as well, love Zinogre. But does Capcom? Is it an iconic flagship, or is it like potato salad at a barbecue? Sure, you might have some, but don't you just want to get stuck into the meat?